All right, well, I bought a $2,300 300ZX. Here's why. All right, well, if you're new to the channel, I'm Jesse. This is my garage. Here's our current project car. That is a 93 Nissan 300ZX Z32. Now that is an NA automatic. And I mean, that is your entry level for project car. Now I bought this car because honestly, I wanted to swap an RB25 Neo in it. I've been wanting to put an RB25 in something for a very long time. And I was originally gonna put one in my 240SX, but you know, it has an SR20. SR20s now have gone up in value substantially. They're hard to find. It kind of fits that car. So it's just kind of like, that car's done. I need to find something else. And I was kind of looking for another 240SX that I could buy and put an RB25 in. And they went up in value pretty drastically. They need a lot of money to get them back up. I mean, people are out of their mind with those cars right now. So if we find one, cool, but if not, I needed to look somewhere else. And I always wanted a 300ZX. Back in the early 2000s, I wanted one, it just wasn't happening at the time. I got into the 240 game. So then recently, it's come to my attention that these cars are undervalued. So, cha-ching, I see opportunity, I'm gonna go get it. So I started looking, a couple popped up in my area, and they were beat. They were haggard. Don't buy a haggard, beat up, body damaged, riddled car. That's just gonna be a headache. Now, I found this one in Nevada, and I live in Idaho, so it's not that far to go down there. I went down there and back in a day. The Tundra, put it in beast mode, and it just mashed right back up. But like I said, this was a 2300ZX, so it's got some issues. It's got some maintenance. It needed a lot of stuff. This car is on its second engine. The first engine, timing belt let go, destroyed the engine. You got to put a new one in. Now, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, those engines were, I mean, you could find them readily available. Nowadays, as like I said, the SR20 has been hard to find. The RB25s, if you follow that market, have gone utterly insane. Those are insane, which is going to bring kind of me back to what I was talking about on the plans to the car. So put that in your pocket. And now these motors are getting harder to find. Now you can find people on Facebook groups that pull them out of their car, and I'm going to put a XYZ in my car, and here's this. But you never know how that's going to play out. So this one has one that was pulled out of a junkyard. So somebody pulled it, somebody bought it, somebody installed it. Now, did they do a good job? It's in there. It looks pretty complete. Everything's back together as it should be. It would be hard to tell that it was a junkyard motor, or it would be hard to tell that it was on a second motor if you didn't kind of know what the signs to look for were, except they didn't replace the oil pan and they didn't do any gaskets on it. So it leaked from the front main seal, leaked from the valve covers, leaks from the rear main seal still to this day. I have to figure out that. I'm gonna put that in and we'll talk about it when we talk about future plans for our 300ZX project car and on Jesse's Garage, which you're gonna subscribe to now. And pretty sure that the motor that was in there when I bought it had the factory timing belt on it from, now we don't know what engine that is. We don't know if it's actually a 93 because the chassis is a 93. I'm gonna go ahead and say it's not a 93. It's probably like a 90 or something like that because they're the oldest version of the car, the ones that are gonna fail the first, most readily available, gonna be the cheapest to get an engine out of, and that's probably what somebody stuck in there at one point. I didn't care. I'm just gonna buy the car and we're gonna pull out the engine and put an RB25 in. So when I bought the car, of course, I did my due diligence. We did the Carfax, we did all that stuff. I started boning up on VG30 motors and kind of what to expect and why some people just have such a bad experience with them. Well, it turns out that the timing belt, nobody takes the time or spends the money to replace, or they just don't know. I feel half the time people buy these cars, and that's why I'm getting all this information out, is they don't know that it is super duper important 2, get that timing belt up to speed. Once we got the deal all ready to go on this car, and I was gonna drive down to Nevada, and I said, okay, this is what we're doing. This is, you don't know when the timing belt is, been done last. It's extremely important. I'm gonna go ahead and negotiate. So you use your tools. So watch this channel to get tools to negotiate the price of the car. And I know some of you already are, because I get messages on Instagram and on YouTube about, hey, I'm gonna buy a car, blah, blah, blah. What's up? Timing belt. And I say, put that into the offer, because it is huge. And you should account for that when you go to buy the car. If the timing belt service hasn't been done, you need to know that that's the #1 thing that you're gonna have to do first, because what I would hate for anybody to buy one of these cars and then the timing belt lets go on them that the timing belt was 25 years old, 30 years old, 20 years old, even 15 years old. I mean, all that stuff. So when I went down to Reno to pick up this car, I didn't even test drive it. We drove it onto the trailer. I drove it from the driveway that it was in onto the trailer. I was like, I don't need to test drive it. It runs, it starts, sounds good, it's complete. That was the #1. Another thing I was looking for was #1 thing I was looking for was complete exterior with no damage, complete interior with all the body pieces and all the panels, and hadn't been gutted for someone to build a race car or anything like that. So once those 2 criteria were met, I didn't necessarily care about the engine and the drivetrain, hence the automatic, hence the non-turbo. So I knew the first thing I was doing, because I wanted to drive the car. I didn't have the RB25. Prices have been steadily going up. I bought this back in October of 2020. I knew the first thing I was gonna do was the 120K service. No problem there. Go on the computer, Z1 Motorsports, order the kit, get the kit in, pull the car in the garage, put it on the lift, start checking it out. Still haven't even driven the car more than 200 feet at this point. Tear it all apart, put the 120K service on. I have that video. Go and check it out if you need to do that. I think I have another one coming up. Stay tuned and subscribe for that. It's gonna be much better, much more explanation, and I'm trying to go for just a very user-friendly product on that one. So before I even drove this car for the first time, I've never even driven a 300ZX at this time. I've always just wanted one. I've watched the YouTube videos, kind of see what they were like. I'm a Nissan guy. I have a 350Z, but I've never actually driven a 300ZX at the time, just into my garage. But patience is the key, because I didn't want to buy this car, drive it, and have that belt let go and scatter my engine everywhere. And we were going to pull the engine anyways, but I want to drive this car. And if you watch my video about how it's important to plan your build, you want to have all the pieces. I don't want to pull the engine out before I have the replacement engine and the replacement, all the parts. So the timing belt service 120K timing belt service kit is way cheaper than the new engine. So we're going to put that on first, then I'll drive it. I was super excited to get that service done, get it all put back together, and actually drive this car for once and get it in my name, because at that point it was still, I didn't even take it to the DMV. We weren't doing anything until the timing belt service done. That's how important it is. All right, well, once we had that, I started cleaning it up. We just pulled out all the suspension. Watch the video series if you're new. Go back and watch all the suspension. That's how I like to start my builds, is with suspension, because then we can add the power. We know everything's good, and we're making a car that's going to be enjoyable to drive. Doesn't have wore out bushings, doesn't have wore out struts, shocks, all that stuff. So we just did that. New brakes all the way around. Everything underneath is done. Now we do have to address the power plant. So Jesse, what are you going to do with the power plant? Are we still going RB25? Are we going to do something like SR20? What about an LS swap? Well, you know what? The more I worked on this car, and even doing that timing belt service, the more I learned about this car, the more I just kind of immersed myself in the information that is available for a 300ZX. Honestly, and the more I drove it, the more I fell in love with the VG30. And I said, you know what I want to do? So I talked about the 240SX, talked about the SR20 and that. That's an OEM turbo swap. And I'm thinking, okay, RB25, we got to get new mounts, new oil pan, new XYZ. We really got to get some replacement parts just to get it to fit in the car. And what's better than that? Well, an OEM swap that can put down some power. So where I'm at right now, this is getting close to the end of March 2021, and it's on the horizon, is the OEM twin turbo motor for the 300ZX. Like I said, it doesn't really get better than an OEM swap, because guess what? Nissan already did all the engineering to get that to fit in the car. Now, it's tied in the engine bay, but I tell people all the time, and I'll show them. One of our subscribers is local and he came over to the house. The video is either up or it's coming up, and he was looking at the cars. He bought a Z, wanted me to check it out. We checked it out. If you haven't seen that video, either subscribe because it's coming out, or it's already out, so go out and check it. Either way, I'll put some links somewhere up here. And I showed him the engine bay of a 350Z. Now, if you haven't seen the engine bay of a 350Z, and probably the HR, which is the 2007-2000, they're pretty cramped. They're pretty cramped. I would say that they're more cramped than the 300ZX. It's pretty tight underneath there. But that is the plan as of right now. Like I said, if I would have made this video back in October, November, I would be talking about an RB25. Today we're talking about the VG30 twin turbo, which I think is going to be really cool, something special. And like I said, it's OEM performance and design for this car that keeps the weight distribution. And if you don't know, these cars are pretty balanced on weight distribution. And we're not going to throw that off anyways. But I love retro JDM stuff. I love turbos. So welcome, thank you, subscribe, and stay tuned to see what happens on our $2,000 300ZX.